Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community, and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity, including Bitwarden's new premium pricing and offerings, Microsoft handing over BitLocker keys, and a whole bundle of ICE updates and much more. I am Nate, and with me this week is Jonah. How are you doing, Jonah?
I'm doing great, Nate. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm good. I've got my more powerful computer here today, and I just realized I'm like completely hidden by it now.
Whatever works. Yeah, over here it's
Yeah.
a bit chilly in Minnesota. I actually had to start Monero mining with my spare idle home lab resources to heat up the place a bit. So don't want those pipes to freeze. That's what I've been up to.
So I guess the question then becomes: Are you making back the money that you're spending on energy?
Yeah,
Or,
almost
I don't
certainly
know.
not. But in theory, equally as efficient
Right?
as an electric heater, right? It's just heat. So and it
It's got to
works.
be better.
It's brought me back
Yeah.
up to that 50-degree mark in the basement, so we're all good.
Oh man. Yeah. All right. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information and facilitates a community on our forum and on Matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. So before we talk about Bitwarden, let's give some quick updates on what we've been working on at Privacy Guides this week. And over in the video department, we're hoping to have the next level in the smartphone course out for members probably this weekend or early next week. And that would be the intermediate for Android and iOS. We have a new video coming out about private browsing. I'm pretty sure I mentioned that last time. The first cut is done. That's my job there. And that should be off to Jordan for proper editing at some point this weekend to, make it look awesome like Jordan does. And I want to remind you guys that we are putting out boatloads of shorts over on the Privacy Shorts channel. Privacy Guide, I think it's at Privacy Guides Shorts. And those are actually all based on this podcast. So I've seen you guys post comments in the past where you're like, yeah, I just want to share like this one story with a family member or something, or, send it to somebody. I try to keep them all under 3 minutes so that they fit on YouTube for YouTube Shorts. And that is a great one to go check out.
And we've been
Jonah
posting those
will give us the next updates.
to other platforms too before I go on with the updates, right? Like you can follow that on TikTok or Twitter or wherever you want. Hopefully at some point we'll get better at posting to loops, but it's been a bit tricky getting that set up with their automated system, unfortunately, but I hope there's new news soon. They said they were increasing the length limit on loops as well when I asked them about that, but last time I checked they hadn't, but I haven't checked recently. So yeah, if you're a fan of alternative platforms like that, just keep an eye on that and we'll try to keep you updated. Over on website updates and other stuff that we've been doing at Privacy Guides, I know we've been putting out a lot of those news briefs. We've been continuing to do that, and we've had a lot of meetings about budgeting for that and trying to make sure that we can consistently do that to keep people up to date on our site and the forum. So Free has been working on those, as have you, Nate, been posting some news briefs again, and we hope to continue that reliable service if people are interested in that. If you like the news briefs, definitely let us know in the comments or chat or whatever, because it would be really useful feedback to know what you like and what you don't like. Beyond that, not a lot of new stuff has come out on the Privacy Guide side of things besides videos, but we've been planning some more stuff behind the scenes. We've been starting to work on the website again and getting PRs merged. I know people have been taking a look at those. We got a bit slow over the holidays, but now we're back at it for the new year. So there should be a lot of cool stuff coming soon. But yeah, I think overall, that's kind of where we're at with Privacy Guide stuff. So we can probably move on to news. What's the first story that you've got for us today, Nate?
All right. So our first story, our big story we're going to talk about this week is from Bitwarden, the password manager. And Bitwarden has launched a quote unquote enhanced premium plan. And the part that was not in the headline, but is probably pretty predictable, is that this comes with a price increase. So first of all, let's talk about what's in the new plan. Basically, I think there's 5 things here. I'm not great with math, but there's Vault Health Alerts, which are It says identify and resolve vulnerabilities and risks to your digital security, reused, exposed, or weak passwords, and immediately take action to resolve them. There's password coaching, where it will flag at-risk passwords right where you access them and guide you to update them with a stronger alternative. You get 5 times as much attachment storage. That one's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Twice as many security keys for 2FA. So you can have up to 10 security keys, which includes things like hardware keys, YubiKeys, pass keys, native biometrics. And this one says coming soon, there will be a phishing blocker. Proactively identify and block malicious websites before they can steal credentials. So the big elephant in the room, of course, is how much is this going to hike up prices? The answer for premium individuals, it is now $1.65 a month or $19.80 a year. And the families plan has become $3.99 a month or $47.88 a year for up to 6 users. And I believe over in the Bitwarden community forum, somebody actually did the math for us and converted that to percentages. That is 98% for individuals and 19.7% for families. Real quick, before I comment on that, they do say that current subscribers will receive a 15-day notice before your next renewal, at which point it will be renewed at the new price. Existing premium members, and they say a few family 2019 customers, so I guess they had a family plan in 2019 that's changed a little bit. They said you will get a one-time 25% loyalty discount for the first year, which unfortunately I did not do the math on that one, and I'm not even going to try to do it live because I will screw it up. Around $15, I guess, for an individual would be the final price. So yeah.
So still more than the current price.
Yeah. You're not wrong. I definitely have thoughts on this one, but Jonah, I'll let you go first. What do you think about this?
Yeah. It's definitely something that I think a lot of people saw coming, especially when Bitwarden took on, what was it, like $100 million in funding or something like that, or they were at $100 million valuation for their funding. So however much funding they took ended up with that being their total company valuation, I believe, which is obviously quite a bit of money, especially for a password manager. And I think the worry was definitely that there'd be more focus on the business side of things, and also worsening of the consumer service. And I think I'm interested to know what people think about this, but taking a look at like the list of features that are being added right now, it feels like the software, to me, is kind of getting to a point where they're adding features that not everyone necessarily needs or wants to pay for, but they kind of have to add that to justify increasing the price and increasing their revenue and paying back all of these investors. And I think from my perspective, I think that's a bit unfortunate. The obvious argument against this is that like the price right now, even after the increases, is not very high compared to the competition. You're still getting a pretty good deal. I pay more for a different password manager already, so it remains cheaper than a lot of the alternatives. But in terms of what existing customers are getting for this additional price, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. So I would imagine that people who currently use the service and like it quite a bit can be a bit upset about this. It's not a huge amount, but double the prices, that's not nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen some very polarizing reactions to this myself. Real quick, one thing I should have mentioned that I completely forgot to mention is that they make a point of saying the free plan is not changing. So if you're a free user, they're not going to start paywalling any of the features you've currently got. And they also say that the self-hosting is not going anywhere either. And they actually say there's a Bitwarden Lite self-host, which I did not know that. And I'm kind of curious about that because I think that was one of the reasons for Vault Warden, is that Vault Warden was supposed to be like a lighter implementation of Bitwarden, but that's a different discussion. But yeah, I agree. So I shared this around, and one of my friends in the privacy space, he was totally down with it. He's like, yeah, I mean, it's a price increase, but it's still cheaper. Like you said, it's still cheaper than pretty much any other, at least reputable offering for sure. And I agree with you. Like some of these things, like the Vault health alerts, like I think that would be really cool. Even though I practically abuse Simple Login, I use it so much. Like I use Simple Login like crazy, so I don't really need to worry too much about like, have I been pwned? Oh, this 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 email was found in a data breach, but like passwords, even though I don't reuse passwords, if mine shows up in a data breach, that's an even bigger problem since I don't reuse passwords. That's really alarming. So kind of getting that notification and not having to be so, not that I don't like it when people are proactive. Of course, we encourage everyone to be proactive about their privacy, but it's one less thing to put on the user is what I'm trying to say. To have that automatic, like you get a notification that, oh, hey, these credentials were found in a breach, you need to go change them, or whatever at-risk passwords are with the coaching, like, oh, you're reusing these passwords, which 99 times out of 100 when I do that, it's like, yeah, because they're the same, like, you know what I mean? I have to do it that way for whatever reason. But yeah, some things like 5 times as much attachment storage. I've honestly used Bitwarden Send like twice. I really don't use it a lot. I don't know who has 10 security keys. That seems like a lot. And the phishing blocking, I'm a little bit curious about that one and how that's going to work, because I know one of the points of a password manager is that it's just not supposed to autofill if, it's not a legitimate website. So I'm curious, what is this phishing blocker? How's it going to add additional protection on top of just not autofilling? Is it going to be like DNS based, which for the record is better than nothing in my opinion, but there are a lot of people who make the argument that it's just it's not the best system for doing things to use DNS based blockers. So yeah, I'm really curious how a lot of the stuff is going to roll out, but I'm with you. I think most of it are things that either people won't get really, I think the average person won't really get value out of, or they might get some value, but I'm not sure if it's really like a 98% price hike value, but they do still remain super affordable.
It's interesting. I started a quick poll in the YouTube chat here, and got a couple votes in. People are kind of split down the middle as to whether they're fans of the Bitwarden changes, yes or no. If you answered yes, I'm curious. We actually have more yes answers right now. If you want to share in the chat what features you're most excited about from this change, or if you just like the change because you think it's a more reasonable price and it's more sustainable, maybe you're a fan for that reason. But yeah, definitely curious to know what people think, because for me, yeah, like these features, they aren't super enticing for myself personally, but I can definitely see why some people would use them, especially if you use something like Bitwarden Send more than you do.
Yeah, maybe people are using Bitwarden Send like crazy.
Maybe.
I don't know. I've only used it a couple times, but we already got one response here. It says, happy to support the devs, and the Vault health alerts are helpful. So yeah, I mean, that's fair. I get that. Like I said, still cheaper than any other. And I'm actually about to, I might be about to get one of my family members using Bitwarden this weekend, I'm hoping. So
had another question. And somebody asked if this replaces the $10 a year plan. And it does.
Yeah.
The price increase to, what is it, $19.80 a year now? So
yeah,
that is the new individual plan. And you're not grandfathered in if you're on the current $10 a year plan right now. You'll get a discount.
But you will get a one-time discount.
Yeah. So that'll take $5 off your next renewal, and then you're on the $20 a year plan for forever. Which is also, I think that's another aspect of this that I don't really like. I like people who are on like these older early adopter type plans to be able to keep what they paid for, basically, especially when you're justifying the price increase by including new features. Like, I would think it would be nice if Bitwarden offered people who are on the $10 a year plan to stay on it without getting access to these new features. I think that would make a lot of sense and might make the transition a bit nicer. Personally, anyways, that's what I would say.
I totally agree. Although I will be honest that I don't really know what's like. I know that technically that's possible, but in a business sense, behind the scenes, I don't really know if there's like, oh, there's actually a really good reason they didn't do that for whatever reason. But yeah, I agree. I was kind of hoping that too. Like, oh, but I'm grandfathered in, right? And it's like, nope. So yeah, cool. Thanks. Although I think I did just renew my subscription, so that's a plus.
Well, you got time, Ben. I'm sure there is a very good business reason too, but I don't know. I think businesses should kind of go the extra mile with that sort of thing. And even if it doesn't make a ton of sense, like it's nice to keep people happy who are using it, but maybe everyone who's using Bitwarden will be happy with it. I don't think Bitwarden is in a ton of danger of being like becoming terrible, especially because we have something like Vault Warden out there. It's under a good open source license. So like worst case scenario, I have no doubt that like consumers will be able to continue using Bitwarden or some fork forever, even if like Bitwarden themselves pivots to more like business products, basically.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of open source. That's why we love to support it. So
I was gonna say, because they could always do what was it, Redis, the database software that like once they went closed source, everybody was just like, cool, we'll use the most recent open source version and just pivot and go from there. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be the most likely scenario if, God forbid, that were to happen.
It's good that Bitwarden already has like an open source community in Vaultwarden that's working on the self-hosting side of things. Because I think obviously like if something were to happen to Bitwarden, the clients, the Vaultwarden project right now seems like a pretty good candidate to take over like a fork of those clients as well and just do an all-in-one thing. So at least that community already exists and you're not going to be scrambling to pull people together in a worst case scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
That's like the problem with open source projects like Firefox, for example, where like if Mozilla went away, who's going to take that over? Like nobody. Nobody's working on something like that right now. So there's some open source projects which aren't so great about that.
I know somebody's going to say it. We know about the Ladybug, Ladybird, whatever.
Ladybird,
we know about that browser, but it's not out yet. And I think it's actually still a ways from coming out. So
yeah.
But I get your bigger point for sure. There's a lot of really important projects that, the classic XKCD meme that have like that single choke point. It's like, well, if something bad happens, something really bad is going to happen. So unfortunate.
I think that's all we have for Bitwarden stuff, unless you had anything to add. So we'll take a look at our next story here. This is from Security Week. Predator spyware turns failed attacks into intelligence for future exploits. So we see the story that starts out, the notorious Predator spyware is more sophisticated and dangerous than previously recognized, new research shows. So pretty much in December of 2024, for some historical context, the Google Threat Intelligence Group published research on the Predator code. But now Jamf has actually published some new research of a separate sample that they found, which details some previously undocumented mechanisms that illustrate how Predator is a bit more sophisticated than initially thought. So not only this article says not only is Predator spyware, but it has a lot of tools that are built in that can self-diagnose why an attack might have failed, and it can learn from its own failures to attack different devices to potentially send data back to the developers of this spyware that they can use to improve and improve how it attacks devices and harden it against being detected by researchers. So just an interesting spyware story, I think. Definitely something to keep an eye on, because it shows that like the people who are going after your devices like this, whether it's through Predator or other spyware like Pegasus, these are very well resource groups that are working on this, and they have a lot of tools at their disposal. And it just shows that like the security of your operating system and your devices is super important, which is why we would recommend using something like Graphene OS, for example, or keeping your phone up to date against these security updates, because not only like is this spyware out there, but as this article says, the spyware is evolving pretty much in real time, and it's sending a lot of data back that can be used by the developers to help make it even more effective than it already is. I think that's kind of the summary of what's going on here. Were there any particular points in this story, Nate, that you wanted to highlight?
I don't think so. It's definitely, in my opinion, it's not an overly technical article. Like I think Bleeping Computer, for example, they love to really dig in when they talk about like a new malware and talk about all the delivery mechanisms. And this one I think was pretty accessible to most of our audience. But yeah, it is really impressive the way it talks about how it like it'll detect if the iPhone is running in developer mode. And they say that if you've enabled developer features, you're probably not a normal target. And so that's one of the things that Predator uses to know if it's on the right device. They talked about how basically it can like wipe its own error logs or crash logs and that's one of the ways that that organizations like Citizen Lab or Google will detect if there's a spyware infection. So it's kind of like covering its tracks. And yeah, it's really interesting stuff. And I think the takeaway that I really took away from it is just that this is always a game of cat and mouse. Privacy in privacy and security. You know, we've got, you can just look at the history of like hashing algorithms, right? And encryption. We rolled out with some type of encryption, and then whether it was the good guys or the bad guys, somebody found a way to crack it. So we rolled out another one, and somebody found a way to crack that. And it's just a constant, you know, thing of constantly trying to improve. And these days we're seeing that a lot with like post-quantum cryptography, right? Like even though quantum computers are potentially still a number of years away, a lot of organizations like, I know there's like Signals one, we talked about Session. I always forget a list, but there's a whole bunch of organizations that are like already trying to get ahead of that curve because, again, cat and mouse. And yeah, it was a really interesting read and a reminder of like how elusive some of this stuff can get, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're interested in like this malware stuff in more state-sponsored spyware, definitely give this article a read and learn more about this because, like you said, it's good to be aware of like what these threat actors are doing in order to compromise your security and privacy. And even though a lot of people, especially who are watching this, probably aren't at risk of this sort of thing, it's also the case where you see pretty advanced technology and malware come out of groups like this right away, but a lot of this stuff does end up making it into like consumer malware that hackers can just buy off of forums on the dark web or whatever and run against like compromised computers later on. And so, you know, we could definitely start to see more advanced capabilities show up in regular malware, which would be a problem if you don't keep your devices up to date. So just always a reminder of the importance of these security updates. In a little bit, we're going to talk about another story, Microsoft handing over BitLocker keys, which is crazy. But right before that, Nate, I think you had more spyware news that you wanted to share.
I do. So for this next story, we're going to head over to Ireland, where the headline says Ireland wants to give cops spyware and the ability to crack encrypted messages. And man, was it Germany that we just talked about recently that wanted to do something like this? I'm losing track. So many European countries are trying to do
a lot of countries want to do something like this.
They never learn. I'm thinking of that clip from SpongeBob where SpongeBob's the bully's going to beat him up and people keep misunderstanding him and they think it's this old guy. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? But yeah, so it says here, the Irish government is planning to bolster its police's ability to intercept communications, including encrypted messages, and provide legal basis for spyware use. So to their tiny defense, the article points out that there are existing regulations surrounding telecommunications. It's called the Postal Packets and Telecommunications Messages Act, and it's from 1993. And I think we can all agree that the communication landscape has changed just a little bit since 1993. So I will give them that one. Maybe they should update their law, but I'm not sure this is the right way to update it. So they say that this bill will bring communications from IoT devices, email services, and electronic messaging platforms into scope, whether they are encrypted or not. And I love the way the Register put this one here. The Register is very open with their bias, and I love their snark. Sometimes they say, in a similar way to how certain other governments want to compel encrypted messaging services to unscramble packets of interest, Ireland's announcement also failed to explain exactly how it plans to do this. It then went on to say that it promised to implement a robust legal framework alongside all necessary privacy and security safeguards if those proposals ultimately do become law. Yeah, it says that they're going to follow the EU Commission's roadmap for law enforcement data interception. And I'm assuming they're talking about chat control. I really hope they're not, but
yeah, probably.
Yeah. But then on to the spyware bit. It says Ireland will also take the EU's lead on spyware, establishing a legal provision for its use only in cases of strict necessity, which I'll come back to that in a minute. So basically in what is that? The European Commission? It says the EC. The EC's 2024 paper examining the legality of spyware noted that it could be used by member states, but only where situations absolutely require it. Programs must be used proportionally with the judge's approval and with stringent oversight. The Justice Ministry said it would take this paper into consideration. And they're also looking to establish a legal power for police to scan electronic equipment in specific locations to identify people of interest and their associates in relation to serious crime investigations. For example, this could include police camping outside a single location and operating IMSI catchers, commonly known as stingrays. So, yeah, this is really concerning. Before I forget, when I said I want to circle back to the whole only in cases of strict necessity and only where situations absolutely require it. We see, not just in privacy, but all across the board, we do see this definition becomes really loose, which is why, and I'm fully convinced they do this on purpose, but lawmakers will try to introduce these kind of laws and they'll always go for the most extreme example, right? They'll say oh, we have to stop child predators and stop violent drug trafficking or whatever. And, to be fair, bad things. We should try to stop those. And they do that on purpose because then you look like a monster. If you're well, I don't think we should pass this law. And they're oh, so you hate children. But the problem is that once these laws get introduced, the line starts to get kind of fuzzy after a while. You start to get into these gray areas where it's well, is this a child abuse case, or is this a different case, or is this, is this drug related enough that we can justify this thing? Or not to get too off topic, but Joseph Cox, his book Darkwire, has a really great story in it where I don't remember if it was an informant or not, but basically, so for those who don't know, this was the story of how the FBI basically sold an entire honeypot network of phones to criminals. And there was a dude who was kidnapped and they were going to torture him and kill him, the drug dealers. And because they had insight into this guy's phone, they knew where he was, they knew what was happening. And they went ahead and made the executive decision we're going to go in and get this guy, even though we might potentially blow the lid off our investigation, because how did people know where he was and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, it's that kind of gray area where it's well, should we go in and intervene? Or is this going to cause problems? Is this going to, do we have the authority to do this kind of thing? And in that case, I guess that was a good example, but yeah, my point being, it turns into a slippery slope. The slippery slope goes both ways, right? It can get out of hand real fast, unfortunately. I think that was that's other than the given that we really don't like these kind of laws being passed because there is no such thing as a backdoor that only the good guys can use. I can't believe we have to say that in 2026 when we already had Volt Typhoon, where the entire Chinese government was not operating, but they had access to the entire US telecommunications infrastructure. And we didn't know how long they were there. We didn't know when we were going to kick them out. I'm still not sure we've kicked them out fully, but we claim we have. And for some reason, even though this has actually happened, we still need to tell people that there's no such thing as a backdoor that only the good guys can use. But I'll get off my soapbox. Do you have any thoughts on this story?
The government obviously knows this as well, because exactly like they said in this article, the government never has a plan of how this can be done. It's because they can't come up with one, experts can't come up with one. It's not possible to break encryption as we know it and have it remain secure. And so it's all of these laws, I think, they want to create a point where they can basically jail you for refusing to encrypt or decrypt your devices. They want to avoid all of these cases that they have where people have all of this data and they can't get into it. And even if they can't get into it, now you don't have to prove any sort of guilt anymore. Just the presence of that encrypted data is enough for you to be guilty, which is not a great situation to be in. It doesn't make any sense in terms of the rule of law that we have now, where people are innocent until proven guilty, and wanting to remain secure, of course, is not something that should be making people inherently guilty in these cases. There are so many reasons that you would need high security, and all of the security that we're talking about is very widely used in terms of finances, in terms of medical and other sensitive information online, in terms of all of this stuff. And yeah, the whole backdoor situation and its attack on end-to-end encryption is extremely untenable. but governments continue to push for it. So yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. We've talked about a lot of this end-to-end encryption stuff on the show before, and I think the article covers it well. But if you're in Ireland, this is definitely something to keep an eye on. And if you're not in Ireland, keep an eye on like what's going on in your legislation as well, and what laws may have already been passed, because we definitely see a lot of stuff like this all around the world, where they just want access to all of your data before you've done anything wrong. And I think that is very, very dangerous.
I do wholeheartedly agree with you. And I just want to add that I do think there's also probably a handful of politicians who at least have some good motivations. And where I'm going with this is one of my friends likes to use the phrase nerd harder. There's people who just don't understand technology. And again, the whole rant I just went on about you can't make a backdoor that only the good guys can use. I think there are people who, regardless of their motivation, are like, oh, well, that's a technical problem we can solve. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not. and I think that's where just general education, like digital education and cybersecurity education, and kind of raising that level of tech literacy among people really comes in handy, because I think there's tons of people out there that really probably think like, oh yeah, no, you can totally make something that's secure like that. And we need to make people understand like, no, you can't. Anytime anyone tries to tell you that, they are selling you snake oil.
Yeah,
you know,
wouldn't that be nice? More tech literacy.
I know. And I mean, I'm not saying it's easy or it's going to happen overnight. I'm just saying, there's an important part for that for sure. So, all right. You want to tell us about this Microsoft story?
Yeah, we'll move on to this one. This was reported by Forbes. Microsoft gave FBI keys to unlock encrypted data, exposing a major privacy flaw. The tech giant says that it receives around 20 requests for BitLocker keys a year and will provide them to governments in response to valid court orders. But companies like Apple and Meta set up their systems so such a privacy violation isn't possible. So this Forbes article basically covers this story. They say early last year, the FBI served Microsoft with a search warrant, asking it to provide recovery keys to unlocked encrypted data stored on 3 laptops. Federal investigators in Guam believe the devices held evidence that would help prove individuals handling the island's COVID unemployment assistance program were part of a plot to steal funds. The data was protected by BitLocker, which is software that's automatically enabled on many modern Windows PCs to safeguard all the data on the computer's hard drive. So BitLocker works in an interesting way where you can store all of these keys either like printed out or on a file or on like a USB drive that you own, but it also allows you to back up those keys to Microsoft servers in your Microsoft account, which Microsoft heavily pushes as a convenience feature. But of course, that does open you up to your key potentially being leaked if Microsoft suffers a compromise, or in this case, if they give the key away due to a valid court order. In this article, they say Microsoft confirmed to Forbes that it does provide BitLocker recovery keys if it receives a valid legal order. While key recovery offers convenience, it also carries a risk of unwanted access. So Microsoft believes customers are in the best position to decide how to manage their keys. That's a statement from Microsoft spokesperson Charles Chamberlain. I would say that's a very interesting statement for them to be making, because Microsoft very heavily pushes this backup to Microsoft Flow. If device encryption is enabled by default on your current Windows device, which most of them are out of the box, and they force you to sign in with Microsoft, that's going to get enabled, and this is going to be the case without it even prompting you, to my knowledge. I believe device encryption in Windows 11, the consumer versions, are automatically set up like this. If you set up BitLocker manually, you do have the option during setup. It gives you the option to back up to a Microsoft account or print it off or to a USB or wherever. But not many people are doing that, especially when it's not the default configuration. And so I think that this does demonstrate that you are potentially at considerable risk of your data being leaked or improperly accessed if you are storing your recovery keys in this way. The article says that the Guam case here that they're describing is the first known instance where the Redmond, Washington company, Microsoft, has provided any encryption keys to law enforcement. Back in 2013, it says a Microsoft engineer claimed he'd been approached by government officials to install backdoors in BitLocker, but had turned the request down. And that might be true. I have not heard of any stories where these recovery keys have been shared by Microsoft, although according to that statement earlier where they receive a lot of requests, it's not clear to me whether they actually complied with those 20 or so requests that they receive a year. They might have been doing this for longer, and this is the first publicly known or uncovered case of this. So I'd be interested to see more data about that, because I'm not sure if that specifically was covered in this article. But regardless, this threat has been, I think, known for a while among technical BitLocker users. It's noted on our website, for example, if you're setting up BitLocker, to not, trust this recovery method, because Microsoft is just storing this key in plain text in a database for your account, right? It's not end-to-end encrypted. It's not something that only you can access. I'm curious where Forbes in this article, when they say that Apple and Meta are setting up their systems differently, I don't know where they're getting that information from. I know that Apple has File Vault, which also backs up your keys to iCloud, and I wasn't able to find any information that says that they back up those keys any differently than how Microsoft works. So I might need more research into that, but from what I could tell, I probably wouldn't trust that iCloud recovery mechanism for the same reason that you can't really trust Microsoft's here. All of the data that I was seeing about Apple's solution basically indicated that you could get that File Vault recovery key with only your email and password, which would indicate that it's probably not being stored with the same encryption as like other data in the advanced data protection program, for example. Because normally to access like iCloud Keychain on an Apple device, you need your iCloud login information, but you also need a separate device that already has your keys. So you need like a lock screen passcode of a device or something like that, because they use a separate credential from your Apple ID credentials to encrypt all of that end-to-end encrypted data. Whereas if you can get a File Vault recovery key with only your iCloud password and none of that other key information, I would be surprised if that data is protected in a different way than how Microsoft protects it. I think that's my spiel on Apple and Microsoft for now, at least. When you were looking at this article, Nate, was there anything that jumped out to you that you wanted to talk about?
There were a couple, kind of one other thing that was in the article that you didn't touch on that I would like to kind of point out. And so one of the people they interviewed said that Microsoft receives around 20 requests for BitLocker keys per year, but in many cases, the user has not stored their key in the cloud, making it impossible for Microsoft to assist. And again, that was previously. Now Microsoft, I think you're right. Now when you set up a Windows computer, it by default makes it extremely difficult to not set it up with a Microsoft account online. And then if you do that, it automatically decides to back up the keys to the cloud. So that statement is probably about to change, which kind of brings me to the other two things that I wanted to quote, which this is all related. A lawyer for the ACLU said that this isn't just an issue in the US. Foreign governments with questionable human rights records also demand data from tech giants like Microsoft. And then the last person that they closed on, the last person they spoke to said, now that the FBI and other agencies know that Microsoft will comply with warrants similar to the Guam case, they'll likely make more demands for encryption keys. My experience is once the US government gets used to having a capability, it's very hard to get rid of it. So
yeah,
I know. I feel bad because we talk about the slippery slope a lot. And I want to acknowledge that the slippery slope is not always true, but this is one of those things where, like he said, once the capabilities there, or as Kerry Parker likes to say at Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back in. And this is one of those things where we have a proven track record. So I personally would not be surprised if that 20 requests a year number starts to exponentially skyrocket in the coming years as more and more people move to Windows 11, as it becomes easier to recover this data. So yeah. I don't know. What is Privacy Guide's official recommendation for encryption software on Windows, short of don't use Windows? I know that's always like the easy answer, but unfortunately that's not always the answer everybody can do.
That would be nice. No, typically we would recommend using BitLocker because it has some advantages. You do have to set it up properly to avoid cases like this. But the biggest advantage of something like BitLocker, for example, is that you can use the TPM, the secure enclave, on the device to potentially rate limit access attempts to your data, especially if you use a weaker password. I think a lot of people use weak login and encryption passwords on a regular basis to protect their data because it's easier to remember. And so you're going to want some sort of hardware security to prevent brute force attacks against that. At the same time, TPMs, especially in BitLocker, it's not infallible, and you can always use something like Encrypted as well. The other advantage of BitLocker, though, is that you can retain secure boot access, and that is more challenging to do if you're using something like Encrypted. So that's typically why we continue to recommend BitLocker for Windows users. From our perspective, I mean, I would say you're already using Windows anyway, so you're giving up, I mean, especially nowadays, a ton of privacy just by using this platform because so much of it just collects and sends data to Microsoft now. It's ridiculous, but yeah, that's typically what we'd recommend. I think getting off of Windows is the smarter move for a lot of people.
Yeah, I do have a Windows computer that I use strictly for gaming and production, and I know some people will say that most games and certain DaVinci can run on certain Linux distros, but all that aside, where I was going with is I had to manually upgrade it to the latest version of Windows 11 because for some reason it stopped at like 23H2 or something, which stopped getting updates in November. And I was like, all right, I need to go fix this. And to what you're saying about the spying and like the number of softwares that I had to use to just like, first I like manually go through all the settings to like disable all the toggles for privacy. And then I have to run, like privacy.sexy, W10 privacy. I don't know how much I trust it, but oh no, shut up 10, or I think it's just oh no, shut up now. Like just, it was literally like a multi-hour process to run all these different softwares to be like, all right, let me make sure it's killing this telemetry, removing OneDrive, removing this, removing that, removing Copilot. It's just like, it was a moment where I was sitting there and I'm like, how hard would it really be to get DaVinci running on a Linux computer? Which I know can be done, but I also have audio plugins and stuff. It's, I don't know, but yeah. I try not to use it for anything sensitive at least. So, all right. So in a minute, we're going to talk about a bunch of updates on ICE and what they've been up to on the privacy side of things. But real quick, we're going to hop over to Europe and we're going to talk about one of the first alternative app stores in the EU that is shutting down. So some of you guys may remember a couple of years ago, the Digital Markets Act came into effect in the EU and did many things. But one of the things it did is it forced Apple to open up to third-party app stores. And one of them, the Set App Mobile, is now shutting down. It first launched in September of 2024, and it says that it offered dozens of apps across categories like productivity, finance, video, creativity, and more. This was a $9.99 monthly subscription, provided the Apple ID was associated with an EU member state. That was one of their malicious compliance things, is this is only effective if you're in the EU. But Apple's malicious compliance things, just to be clear. The company says that all applications will be removed by the end of the sunset date, which is February 16th. So in just a few weeks here, applications on desktop will not be affected. And they stated that the reason that they were doing this is, quote, still evolving and complex business terms that don't fit SetApp's current business model. And I love what TechCrunch wrote here. They said the complex business terms being referenced here are Apple's complicated set of fees for apps operating under its new business terms in the EU, which include a controversial core technology fee that charges developers 50, I don't know what the cent version of euros is, but €0.50 for each first annual install over 1 million in the past 12 months. The tech giant revised the fee structure last year to avoid further penalties for non-compliance with the DMA, but instead of simplifying the fees, it made them more complex. Yeah, I mean, that's and then here at the bottom it notes, it says there are still other alternative app stores operating in the EU, most notably the Epic Game Store and the open source Alt Store. So we will see how long those last. Yeah, I mean, Apple really came under a lot of fire for this, rightfully so, in my opinion, because yeah, they really went out of their way to be as obnoxious as possible. And thankfully, the EU did call them out the first time that they did it, and they're like, no, you're technically complying, but you're making it so ridiculously hard that nobody's going to do it. But like the article says, the revised version that they came back with their fee structures and requirements really wasn't much of an improvement. It's just, yeah, there's some things Apple does really well, like security, and there's some things Apple does really poorly, like treating their users' digital sovereignty with respect.
Yeah.
I think that's all I got.
I'm surprised. I missed this article this week. So I'm just finding out this right now as well. I'm surprised SetApp was the app store in question, because they have been pretty successful, I think, on the Mac side of things for a while. The idea behind a lot of what SetApp does is basically they have like one subscription service, and then it comes with a bunch of different apps that you would normally pay one time for or whatever. And it's an interesting model that you don't really see on mobile a lot right now, outside of maybe some games like an Apple Arcade or whatever. But it's an interesting concept, but I think it does show that like the iOS ecosystem is just much more restrictive than Mac OS, and hopefully Apple doesn't bring Mac OS down with them. But yeah, the requirements that Apple has for these alternative app stores in the EU is extremely onerous, and it's crazy that Apple continues to restrict this only to the EU and hasn't expanded this to other regions where people would want access to alternative app stores. It's just ridiculous. It kind of related to this. I just saw somebody posting on social media about how they were banned from the Apple developer platform because they were using their developer certificate to sideload like just apps, like open source apps from GitHub or whatever, for 90 days instead of the 7 you usually get when you when you sideload with just a free personal certificate. But apparently even that was Apple took action against their account and stopped them from doing that, which is ridiculous. Like there's just this war on on installing your own software or whatever you want to do with your own devices that Apple is waging is crazy to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I know I'm not the only one. A lot of people in the privacy and just really the tech space, I think one of the biggest complaints with Apple is just the lack of digital sovereignty and the fact that it's all in this walled garden. And that's great when it goes well. That's great when everything works and everything integrates and you don't have any issues and it's really smooth and it's really convenient. But then, like you were saying, when somebody gets banned for something, and I will give Apple credit that the few times I've had to deal with their customer support, they've been fantastic. But you never know. Like, what was it? Google had a case where, long story short, there was a guy. He was under his doctor's supervision because this was during COVID, I believe. He was taking pictures of his son's rash for medical reasons. Google automatically flagged it as CSAM, and his account got permanently deleted. And even after the police cleared him and everything, Google would not reinstate his account. And yeah, it's just that lack of digital sovereignty in any case, whether it's Google, whether it's Apple, like not having people or not giving people the option to easily do what they want with their own devices. Like, it's your device. You paid $1,000 for it. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah. Very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Let's get into all of this ICE stuff. How do you want to handle this, Nate? Do you want to kind of rapid fire go through all the ICE headlines one at a time, and then we'll talk about all of them at once, or do you want to take this one story at a time?
I think we can kind of give an overview. For listeners, there's about 4 of them here that we picked out. And I think our goal, just to kind of let you guys know, because we don't, we're not really partisan. So we're not doing this to get in on it because it's a trendy topic right now. But there's a lot of stuff going on with ICE that is directly privacy related. And we wanted to talk about that. So I think, I think let's just do like a quick rapid fire of the stories, and then we can talk about them all as a group. How's that sound?
Yeah, let's look at this first story here. I think a lot of these stories were reported by 404 Media, but this one was. This story detailed Elite, which is a Palantir-developed app that ICE uses to apparently find neighborhoods to raid. 404 Media says internal ICE material and testimony from an official obtained by 404 Media provides the clearest link yet between the technological infrastructure Palantir is building for ICE and the agency's activities on the ground. So pretty much what this app does is that it populates a map with potential deportation targets. It brings up a dossier on each person that the app has found, and it provides a confidence score on the person's current address. It uses a wide variety of mainly government sources to find these addresses and other information, including from the Department of Health and Human Services. So yeah, crazy stuff going on there.
Alrighty. Yeah, our next one comes from 404, and it says ICE's facial recognition app misidentified a woman twice. And basically, ICE they have several apps right now, but one of them that, again, 404 has been covering a lot is called Mobile Fortify. Yeah, there it is, Mobile Fortify, which we really don't know a lot about. Thankfully, a few people have shared some data with 404, and I think that's where most of the information we know has been coming from. But basically, they were detaining a woman, and they were attempting to learn her identity and immigration status. And so they scanned her face with this app, and it returned 2 different and incorrect names. Yeah, this ICE has told lawmakers that the app provides quote unquote definitive determination of someone's immigration status and should be trusted over a birth certificate. So that's a take, regardless of how you feel about tech. The incident, which happened last year in Oregon, cast doubt on that claim. Like Jonah was saying, they say that this data is drawn. I don't know how they thought this was a good thing, personally. They say that this data was not drawn from like open source things. It's drawn from a government database. So, I mean, I guess there's pros and cons to that, but to me, it's just kind of like, okay, interesting. Anyways, they say that it normally it's used to verify travelers as they enter the US. However, it has since been turned inward on American streets. Let me see here. 404 Media previously obtained an internal DHS document which says that ICE does not let people decline to be scanned. And this was originally part of our little roundup here, but this paragraph summed it up really well, so I condensed this. But it says, last week, a group of Democratic lawmakers introduced legislation which aims to rein in Mobile Fortify. That legislation would essentially kill the local law enforcement version of the app. So local cops have their own version, which is great. Restrict the use of Mobile Fortify to ports of entry in the U.S. and force DHS to delete images of U.S. citizens after 12 hours. So, yeah, that's that one.
Yeah, we'll have to talk a bit more about that in a bit. But our next next story we have in terms of ICE here, this again from 404 Media. Feds create a drone no-fly zone that would stop people from filming ICE. The FAA has altered a no-fly zone designation that was originally created for U.S. military bases, and it now applies to DHS, Department of Homeland Security units. Where did this go? Oh, this says the Federal Aviation Administration put a drone no-fly zone within 3,000 feet of Department of Homeland Security facilities and mobile assets, according to a notice to airmen that was posted by the government. The order appears to attempt to criminalize the use of drones to film immigrations and customs enforcement and DHS employees who are detaining people right now, as we know, all over the country. The order is particularly notable because it does not apply just to static locations like the offices of DHS, for example, but also to, quote, vessels and ground vehicle convoys and their associated escorts, end quote. The notice classifies areas within 3,000 feet horizontally and up to 1,000 feet of altitude as no-fly zones and as, quote, national defense airspace, meaning the skies up to a half mile from ICE vehicles in Minneapolis, for example, could fall under this new jurisdiction. The notice states that people who violate the restrictions can be charged criminally, could face civil penalties, and may lose their authority to fly drones in the future. So if that doesn't sound dystopian, I don't know what does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. All right, and our last one, this one comes from Wired, and it says surveillance and ICE are driving patients away from medical care, a report warns. So this is a report from EPIC, which is the Electronic Privacy Information Center. And this is one of those articles that's just full of good information. So I'm going to summarize a couple of paragraphs here, but it's one of those articles that there's not really a lot of dead weight. So if you have the time, I definitely recommend reading it in full. Basically, they posit that our outdated privacy laws surrounding health specifically and rapidly expanding digital systems allow health-related information to be tracked, analyzed, breached, and accessed by both private companies and government agencies. And the organization found that health data routinely escapes medical settings and gets repurposed for surveillance and enforcement and is increasingly deterring patients from seeking care, which, if you follow podcasts like this one, you've known this for a while. The report describes a largely unregulated market. It kind of goes on to talk about just how private healthcare, these companies find workarounds to collect data that they shouldn't really be collecting. And then once sold, it can be difficult or impossible to control, increasing the risks of profiling, discrimination, and higher costs for care while discouraging people from seeking treatment in the first place. Specifically relating to the headline, this person who prepared the report, or the researcher and her colleagues, point to incidents of immigrations and custom enforcement agents occupying emergency rooms, waiting rooms, and hospital lobbies, noting that clinicians have reported agents blocking treatment and listening in on conversations between patients and health workers, which I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like that's probably for sure illegal. For nearly a decade, DHS guidelines advised immigration agents to avoid enforcement actions in sensitive locations such as schools, places of worship, and medical or mental health care facilities, unless exigent circumstances existed or prior approval was obtained. These protections were rescinded in January 2025. Yeah. It says it was replaced with an interim directive for officers to use quote unquote common sense in deciding when and where to conduct enforcement actions. Oh, I want to be so snarky there, but I won't. Legal and healthcare observers have since reported visible ICE activity in medical facilities, such as agents in reception areas and interference with care, and noted that uncertainty about enforcement roles, even in public spaces, is contributing to fear among patients and clinicians. And hospital staff have told reporters that sites of ICE agents may make many wary and exacerbate concerns about privacy, legal rights, and the ability to care for sick patients without interference. So, yeah. Real quick before we dive into analysis, Cannabitter hit the nail on the head here. They said privacy is a nonpartisan issue. So that's why we're talking about this. What these are showing is, regardless of where you lean politically, regardless of any of that, the government is really playing fast and loose with the data. I wish I'd included in here, but I think 404 wrote an article about how in the entire history of ICE, like not a single agent has ever been, how would I word it? Like successfully sued. And I find it very hard to believe that none of them have ever done anything wrong. And that's not a ding on ICE. That's not a ding on like conservatives. That's just human nature. You can't tell me that a force that big has never done anything wrong. So it's very disturbing that we're seeing this organization who is being given basically a blank check to go do anything they want, to access any data they want, to use these apps that, again, the only reason we know about them is because of a whistleblower. Quick personal note on that one. I think it's completely insane that your taxpayer money can be used to pay for things that you're not allowed to know about. Like, that's so insane that they can use our taxpayer money to be like, oh, we're going to buy this surveillance app but we're not going to tell anybody. And maybe if you submit a FOIA request, we might respond to it sometime in the next 12 months. And maybe we won't redact it to the point of being useless. But so, I mean, that's a related issue, but not really what we're talking about here. So it's just really unfortunate. And to the facial recognition story, I just want to point out real quick that it's not unusual for facial recognition to not work, which is all the more worrying that they're like, oh no, you should trust this instead of a birth certificate. Like, hold on a minute now.
That story, the reliance that ICE is putting on this app is definitely the most troubling part of this, because, and this is sort of similar to some of the stuff we talked about last week when it comes to AI, but I think a lot of these tools are kind of along that vein where they're equally as unreliable and they might be AI vibe coded themselves. But I think that ICE is definitely trying to create this environment where, you know, all of their sources are so unreliable almost intentionally in order to you know, create like a vague sense of, oh, we're following these instructions that they can use as a justification to get away with pretty much whatever they want, right? They don't want to be confronted with things that are like hard evidence of your citizenship, for example, like your passport or your birth certificate, when they can use an app that gives them the plausible deniability that they want to do whatever they want, basically. I think that's the situation that we're kind of in right now, where we're basically, these organizations are leaning on tech as an excuse to do a lot of things without the proper review, and yeah, it's it's ridiculous that we've kind of allowed this to happen, I think.
I agree. And actually that's one of the things that, I don't know if it was like earlier in the staff meeting or something, but I remember talking about this recently. Is I've seen stories, multiple stories in the recent past where specifically there was one, I think it was in the New York Times, where they talked about a black man who was arrested because of facial recognition. Like they had the security camera footage from some like robbery or something, and they ran it through facial recognition software, which first of all, you're not supposed to do that. Even the companies that make this software say like, don't run security camera footage through because it's not high definition enough to work right. But they ran it through some like Clearview AI or something, and it returned a hit as like, oh, it's this dude. And I think that dude even found out like, oh, there's a warrant out for your arrest. So he's like, well, I haven't done anything, so I'll go to the courthouse and clear this up. And it's one of those things where in the article, they had the side-by-side of like, here's his mugshot, here's the security camera footage. And even as grainy as the camera footage is, it's like, dude, you can take one look at this guy and know that's not the same guy. But like you were saying, for some reason, they want to blindly trust these apps. And maybe it's the plausible deniability or whatever, but it's like, oh, well, Clearview said it was him, so it must be him. And it's like, anyone with eyesight can tell you that wasn't him. And it's really disturbing how much we're relying on all this tech for everything and all this data that so many people like. That's one of the biggest things that frustrates me in general as a privacy advocate, is like, so many people are like, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. And it's like, yeah, but do you realize how much data they're collecting? Do you realize how much information they're scooping up? Like this, the first story about that Elite app, it includes their name, photo, alien number, if they're an immigrant, their date of birth, their full address. I don't know. I mean, I guess for a government, that sounds like information they would have, but it's like, it's just so much information that we're giving away all the time.
And part of the problem is like all of these government initiatives to centralize all of this data into like a single database that can be searched, basically, because there's no question that the government has had a lot of this data for a very long time, but pretty much until the beginning of this year, when Elon Musk was still around and doing that Department of Government Efficiency thing, where it all kind of got combined together, whereas normally all of these databases were sequestered and there were like processes involved to get this data from like another agency in the government. You could treat them as like independent units instead of just like one big federal behemoth that has all of your information and is constantly spying on you. And that was really the goal behind all of the efficiency measures that we saw in the government. It was to eliminate those processes and make it super easy for somebody who's interested in all of this data, like this administration is, for example, to easily search it, cross-reference everything without, any oversight and without people knowing about it. That was the goal behind it, and I think that is a huge problem that we have right now with the government. The government was not meant to be an efficient force, constantly controlling all of these aspects of your lives and collecting all of this data. Like, efficiency is not the main thing that I want from the government. The things that I want from the government are relatively limited, and they should be doing things correctly. That's the most important thing, and we miss out on all of that when we take this move fast and break things mentality from Silicon Valley and in this tech space and the AI space right now, and we bring it to the government, which is what this administration has really done. I think, I don't know, we've created a very dangerous situation, and that's what I would say about all of these crazy apps that we've talked about here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could go on and on about just that part specifically, right? Like, I remember, dude, in like 2016, 2017, when I started getting into privacy, and I would have these conversations with people, and the whole like, oh, I've got nothing to hide, I'm not doing anything wrong. Fast forward 5 years and Roe versus Wade got repealed, which I'm, again, not trying to get into was that good or bad, but it's like the law changed. And thankfully here in America, we do have rules that you cannot be retroactively charged. So something that used to be legal that becomes illegal, the government is not supposed to be able to come back and arrest you and be like, hey, you did this thing in 2017 and then in 2019 we outlawed it, now we're arresting you. But, I mean, why not change that law too? I don't want to sound too dismal, but yeah, it's just, it's creating, and like you said, on the topic of the Doge thing, like I'm not gonna lie, initially I was one of those people that was kind of like, well, yeah, why not make the government more efficient? And I think it was you and a few other people actually had to explain that to me. It's like, no, that's kind of a feature. And sometimes it is really annoying that, like the Ireland story earlier, we have a telecoms law from 1993. Okay, we need to update that. But also that's the whole reason it's supposed to go slow, is because there's so much on the line and so much can go wrong when the government gets it wrong, that the idea in a perfect world is it's supposed to be slow, and there's supposed to be these opposing sides hashing it out and finding a reasonable middle ground that's effective, even if it's not, super efficient. So, and just tearing down all those roadblocks and like just giving everyone unlimited access to data, it's a risk for cybersecurity. It's a risk of data breach. It's a risk of abuse. We didn't put it in here. I think it's in the data breach section, but there's already all these, I swear there were several stories this week about like one dude was stealing phones from the government and selling them on eBay. One dude like hacked the Supreme Court. Like, just the less roadblocks and the less compartmentalization you put in place, the more potential for abuse is what I'm trying to get at. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's really unfortunate.
A quick aside from these stories here, I saw Thankful for Today in the chat here talking about StreamYard in the chat. I just wanted to point out, if you aren't familiar, you haven't seen these announcements, maybe you're watching on YouTube right now, but we're using a new platform to stream. It's called StreamYard, and it's not that important that you know that, other than the fact that it allows us to stream to here on YouTube, on Twitch, on Kick, on Twitter, and also to its own StreamYard site. So we have a StreamYard.com link that you can visit. You can find it on our form on the announcements for this episode, for example, and it is a great place to watch the stream, especially if you don't have a Google account, because we basically enabled the chat on that platform, so you can chat by just entering a name. Basically, you don't need to have an account or an email or a password. So the data collection should be low, obviously much less than Google. And the chat from all of these platforms, whether you're watching us on Twitch or Kick or YouTube or StreamYard, it's all going to be combined onto the chat on the screen, so you can keep up with that there. But yeah, I just wanted to point out, if you want to ask us questions later on in the show, or you just have something to say about things that we're talking about right now, we have new options. You can chat with us on any of those platforms, and it'll all be combined into one chat where we can highlight comments and see them and respond to them. So if you missed that, hopefully you find that information useful, and you can check that out if you prefer one of these other streaming platforms.
I also just wanted to say nice use of Brave blocking trackers. You can also do that on Firefox with uBlock Origin. So definitely good job. Keep blocking trackers. Speaking of questions, actually, you could probably go ahead and leave some, because I think it's time to move on to the forum updates if we have any. I'm not sure. I think neither of us have really been super active on the forums this week. We've both been pretty busy.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with some of our forum threads, but I believe there are some questions on the thread that we can look at. So let me get this all pulled up here.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here. I'll go ahead and read off the first one. I don't know if this counts as a question, but JG, one of our members, one of our regulars, he suggested, because you mentioned we have all these new streaming platforms now, and Jordan put those in the link on the forum. And so JG said we could reach more people if we had a WhatsApp business account and had like a short feed or weekly updates. I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I don't know if we want to commit to that, but
certainly would have to look into that. Something we've also looked into is like sharing updates, whether it's news breaks or whatever, on Signal. Signal has this problem where if you're put into a group, then you can see all the people in the group and you can potentially message them. And I don't really like this from a privacy and a spam standpoint, unfortunately. I do like, it's very rare you'll hear these words, but I do like Telegram in this respect, where they have these channels where you can basically have public channels, but the membership is private and it's just a one-way communication. I would love to use something like that on Signal. I don't know if WhatsApp has something like that. We do currently share some form updates to Telegram right now if people are on that platform for whatever reason, and we could potentially consider doing that on WhatsApp, but yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't make any promises. I don't know if that'll work out. I'm not familiar with how people use WhatsApp in this regard, if that's common to just have like updates versus just bookmarking the form on an RSS reader or whatever, but it's an interesting idea, and we can definitely look into it.
For sure. JG did have an actual question, which was asking if we could look at AdGuard's new VPN protocol called Trust Tunnel that they just open sourced. Did you hear anything about this?
I've not actually. That is interesting. Did you get to look into that? I could take a glance.
I didn't. I feel bad because I did see it earlier this week, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to circle back around and dig into that a little bit deeper. Here, I
just pulled it up to take a quick glance at this.
You got it? Okay. Let's see. There is actually, in our forum, there is somebody from AdGuard who is answering questions about it, not in our Q&A thread, but in the thread that JG linked. So that's pretty cool. Interesting. They're talking about Molvad's data protocol. I don't know. I think I can say this. I think it's great that they open sourced it. I have a lot of respect for AdGuard. I think even though they're not open source, they have really shown a commitment, in my opinion, to privacy, and I think they do really good work. At least they're ad blocker.
Open source, I will say a good amount of things, right? I don't know what's closed source and open source. I think it's
okay.
I don't know what. I
was under the impression it was mostly proprietary, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, I've only ever used their ad blocker, but I've been very impressed with it. I've been very happy with it, and I do subscribe to their blog posts, and I'm really impressed by their blog posts. They have a really good mix of like, here's some really beginner friendly stuff, but here's some really like advanced stuff. And one thing I've said in the past that I appreciate that their blog posts are not always ads. Like, oh, here's how AdGuard can fix all your problems and you should totally buy our product. But they're also, very like, I don't know, just useful information, whether you buy their product or not. So And I do think it's always a good idea, especially with security things. Security related things should always be open source whenever possible, because it shows that trust and it shows that commitment to can we improve? How do you have suggestions for us to improve? Here's us showing that it's not doing anything malicious. So I will say, just from that perspective alone, I think this is a great move, but I don't know how it compares technically.
It's definitely an interesting theory. I'm really curious about
I mean,
how
it
this
doesn't always
works.
play out,
I mean,
yes.
the way that they're describing this, basically, they wanted to build a VPN that is not obviously a VPN to network observers. So like if you're using WireGuard, for example, it's pretty easy to tell whether somebody's making a WireGuard connection. And especially with OpenVPN, that's the case. So it's detectable, but WireGuard is obviously very fast. When you add obfuscation, that makes it slower, which AdGuard says, which is true. And then this new solution should be, in their words, indistinguishable from HTTPS, which would be great. I definitely would want to see more research into this and get a bit more information about how this works, because this is a very challenging problem to solve. If you look at any of the papers that Tor project has released, for example, on how they obfuscate things, obfuscation and protecting from deep packet inspection and protecting from other like traffic pattern analysis is it's very hard, and it's harder than just like wrapping everything in HTTPS, right? Like just a normal HTTPS tunnel doesn't necessarily provide all of this protection. And so I would be kind of surprised if the way that this works isn't detectable by specialized tools. Just because it's not like detectable by tools right now doesn't mean that like somebody who wanted to see this happening couldn't devise some system or look at the characteristics of these connections to see what's going on. Especially because it'll probably be used with like AdGuard's servers. So that's an obvious red flag right there. If you're connecting to AdGuard servers in the first place, you're kind of going to detect that you're probably using a VPN. So there's stuff like that, but there's also more technical stuff that, I mean, if you could make something perfectly undetectable, we'd see it more widespread. It's a field of research that Tor has been into for a while. They have web tunnels, for example, which sort of sound like they work kind of like this as a proxy, but there are downsides to that, and they're not completely undetectable. They're just harder to detect on a mass scale. So you can't like easily block all of them at once necessarily, but you can still, like in Tor's case, you can tell whether a person is using a web tunnel bridge if you put enough effort into it. And so like the threat model of Trust Tunnel here by AdGuard is not super clear to me. I don't know what they are defending against. I don't see like a white paper on this page. I think this page is the only documentation that I can see. So it's cool. I definitely would want to see more information about it, though.
Well, I'm not going to have much to add to that because I don't know a lot of the technical stuff. But we did have another question from one of our regulars, Nombref also. Says, if you were going to get a second phone number, how would you use both phone numbers? What expectations or limits would you set for each? How would you split accounts across the two phone numbers for those accounts? I mean, I've been using my sudo for years, so the idea of only having two phone numbers sounds very limiting to me. But I think if I could only have two, and in this scenario, I'm going to assume that I'm working like the last job I used to work in audio video and you know, a normal job, I guess I'll say. I would probably just have like work and personal. Or maybe I would have like very important and less important. And by very important, I mean like banking, doctors, like, you know, the things that I absolutely do not want somebody to break into those accounts. But also I like the idea of work and personal because at least then I can have like a work-life balance. And I do know that some employers will like at very least Google your phone number to see if anything crazy comes up and they don't want to hire you for. So I guess 3 phone numbers minimum in my opinion, but Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what sort of compartmentalization that you want. But that's off the top of my head. I feel like that's probably, I would do one of those two. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
That seems like a pretty solid plan. It like you said, it comes down to the use case, and it's pretty tricky with on the phone side of things. Although I've been looking into some providers like VoIP.ms that provide phone numbers for relatively cheap per month. That could be nice to like have a lot more phone numbers to juggle between if you want to have that kind of compartmentalization. But I mean, even if you're paying like $1.50 or $2 a month per phone number, that can still add up pretty quickly.
Yeah,
as far as that goes, compared to like email aliases, for example. So yeah, the phone number stuff is one of the harder things to solve. I typically, personally, I do most things on just one phone number, and then like if I want other things compartmentalized, I make sure to use tools for those other identities that don't require a phone number in the first place. But that's not possible for everyone. So these tools, they're useful, but reliance on phone numbers makes it it's annoying.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah, I've been thinking about messing around with that Cloaked app, but I haven't really. Oh man, I remember when it first launched and all it did was phone numbers. But the reason I didn't use it is because it does require a SIM number. It basically forwards everything to your SIM number. And at the time I didn't have a SIM number. So I was like, whatever. But it used to be like $10 a month or something. And now it's like 25 because they've added all this like data removal service and password manager and all this other stuff that I'm like, can I just get the phone number part? I want to play around with that. But
right.
Yeah, I do want to test that out one of these days.
Testing out a lot of these phone number tools is definitely something that I want to do more. I know someone asked in the chat what we think about SMS Pool, and I've seen them come up a lot. They seem to have good reviews, but I've never used them. But as far as I know, they have like non-VoIP numbers, so that's useful for verification purposes. I'm sure there's a lot of other services like this. We want to put something together sometime. It's been in progress for a while now as far as phone number privacy goes. But yeah, in the meantime, if people have experience with any platforms like that they want to share, that would be really useful information on the forum. But yeah, I don't know. Have you heard of SMS Pool at all? I've seen them around, but I've never.
I'm double checking. Yes. Okay. I thought so. So I was actually in a situation a couple months ago where I had to, or I wanted to verify a phone number with Discord, and SMS Pool did not work at all. I went through
that's a bummer.
I went through, and it's even on their front page. I went through like 24 phone number. The one thing I will say that I like is if a phone number doesn't work and you haven't used it, they'll have an option to basically just refund it back into your account. So I only lost like $5 because that was the initial like deposit or whatever to use the service. But I literally went through like 24 phone numbers of like, generate a new phone number. Try this one. That's not a valid phone number. Return it. Give me a new number. That's not a valid number. Return it. Give me a new number. And I like messed with the settings, and I picked like, they tell you like, oh, this provider will probably work like 50% of the time. I went with one that was like 100%. And I tried like 5 to 10 phone numbers. None of them worked. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But and that honestly, that was the only thing I used it for at that point, because I was like, well, this is all I need. And so I just kind of haven't messed with it since. Not necessarily because I was turned off by that experience. Like I would want to try other services and see if those work better before I completely write it off. But I will say that was not a great first experience, especially when it's on the front page. But yeah, that did not work for me at all.
Well, that's a huge
also it is. And also I was going to say the problem with things like SMS Pool is I think you really need to be careful what you're going to use them on. Because something like Discord, I don't care, right? It's Discord. If they ban me, I'll make a new one or whatever. It's whatever. It's just Discord for me, at least. I know for some people that's like your entire social hub, but then there's other things that like, like a bank account. I don't know who would be insane enough to do this, but somebody out there is like, oh, I signed up for my bank using SMS Pool. And it's like, that's really important. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do that like with Signal, like, oh, because Signal gets a lot of criticism for requiring a phone number, and people are like, oh, I used SMS Pool. And it's like, so what happens when you have to move to a new device? Like, I think those are the things you need to ask is if I lose access to this phone number, how devastating would that be? And if you don't care, then yeah, use something like an SMS pool. That's totally fine. But if it's like, this would be really bad, then you need to find another solution, in my opinion. So
yeah, I agree. It's nicer to have permanent numbers, especially like for something like Signal. I know they have the Signal pin feature that should prevent hijacking in theory, but I wouldn't want like my Signal verification number to potentially be claimed by someone else. So that makes services like that a bit tricky to recommend as well.
Agreed.
But yeah, that is a bummer to hear about your SMS pool experience.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, it's maybe it was just because I know sometimes it's like, oh, all our numbers have been burned. We need to buy a new pool of numbers. And maybe I came in right at that tail end where they needed to do that. So I'm not saying it's a bad service. I'm just saying like I would want to try it on a few more services before I make a judgment either way. But in my case, it did not work. So yeah. All righty. I think that's all we had for questions. I haven't really seen any questions come up in the chat that we haven't answered. Is there anything else that we're missing that you can think of?
Just taking a look at the form here.
Okay. Something interesting pop up?
No, I think, yeah, we're pretty much at the end of the questions we have here. If anyone else has questions about the stories that we talked about today or about anything else, this would be a good time to leave them in any of the chats now, and we can take a look. We'll probably stick around for a little bit longer here and then move towards wrapping things up, I think, for the week.
Yeah. Real quick, Thankful for today pointed out in regards to my SMS pool experience. He says, you didn't lose the money. It just deposited on the service, which is true, which is why it's still in my password manager. That's actually when I was like, hold on, I'm checking something. I was seeing I was like, is that the service I was thinking of? So I was checking my password manager. So yeah, you're right. If I ever do need to use it again, I've got $5 ready to go. So, and like I said, it's $5. If I never use the service again, I'm not really losing sleep over it, but yeah, I don't know. And I'm totally willing to, again, if I run into a situation where I'm like, oh, I need to verify, let me try SMS pool. I've already got $5 sitting there, but we'll really just have to see.
I'm interested in that other point about some services you can use a non-VoIP service like that and then switch to VoIP. I wonder what services Naomi Brockwell is allegedly referring to there, because I am not familiar with services that do that, although maybe it makes sense. I don't know.
I feel like I have had that happen before. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe my bank. I'm sure I opened that account back before I used voice over IP, but now I definitely have voice over IP on it. So I don't know, which I'm not against voice over IP. And I know I'm sure you understand, but just to clarify, like I'm not at all against voice over IP. It's those are voice over IP numbers I have control over. You know, it's not like SMS pool where it just goes away.
And they're very commonly blocked, I think is the big thing. But it would be nice if you can, like once you get past that verification hurdle, if you can switch it to a VoIP number that you do control for like long-term security. That could be a pretty slick setup, but I don't know. I feel like that's probably not common enough across a lot of services that I'd be able to like recommend people do that as a general advice, because I feel like it'd be rare where you can verify with something like SMS pool, but then switch to VoIP. But I guess if we had like a list of sites where that definitely does work, maybe we could consider writing about that. But yeah, seeing as even a service like SMS pool didn't work for you in Discord at all, I don't know. Phone number verification is just ridiculous.
I'm just gonna choose to blame Discord in that situation. That feels like a fun person to blame. So
it's absolutely on them.
Yeah, I mean it definitely is on them, but you know, again, I'm gonna choose to blame them anyways because I don't want to blame SMS pool. So All right.
While we wait and see if there's any more questions, I'll remind people, typically we do this Q&A session at the end of shows, and we try to prioritize members first, people who support our work in the channel. You can always become a member by going to privacyguides.org and clicking the red heart icon in the top right corner of the page. Your support as a member is extremely helpful for everything that we do. We've been putting out content quite a bit more consistently lately, and especially going into this year, you're going to see a lot more stuff come out, hopefully at a more rapid pace as we get back in the swing of things. So yeah, if you find value from any of this, definitely consider supporting us with a membership or a one-time donation. We would really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. We did have one comment come in. They said, posted in the forum, thanks a ton for offering PeerTube as an option in the past. Neat.tube stopped mirroring content a few weeks ago, and I think that is something we're aware of, and I think just haven't had time to look at that. But you also said, if you pursue loops, will you please return to mirroring on PeerTube? I guess that's more of a question for you.
Yeah, there's something going on with PeerTube right now. It's having some issues. A lot of the videos are indeed on PeerTube, but aren't working. They're not being published properly. So the best place to find our videos is always going to be privacyguides.org/videos, where you can watch all of them on our site locally without any connections to YouTube or anything like that. If you're concerned about privacy, you can follow us there, and you can go to our website where you can subscribe to email notifications for our videos as well. So I think if you want to stay up to date without an account or anything, that's definitely the way to do it. I would love to get PeerTube syncing again, because it should be, and we'll get back on that, and we'll be trying to sync the new Privacy Guides Shorts channel on YouTube to PeerTube as well. So that should be a separate channel on PeerTube that will eventually start publishing this content. But yeah, going to our website right now is the best way to do this. Right now, all of the content is on PeerTube, but it's just not being shared publicly for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think you said this, but if you go to the privacyguides.org/live streams, the latest newsletter has the link to PeerTube. That is it's embedded, so it's kind of hard to tell, but yeah. All right. I think that's all we got this week. All right. So I just mentioned the newsletter. All the updates from This Week in Privacy will be shared on the blog, which is also a newsletter that you can sign up to receive in email, or you can subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you wish to do it that way. For people who prefer audio podcasts, we have a podcast available on all of the podcast platforms, and again, through RSS. And as we just mentioned, this video will be synced to PeerTube, and you can find that on our website. Again, Privacy Guys is an impartial nonprofit organization focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on privacyguides.org. Like Jonah said, you can click the little red heart icon located in the top right corner, and you can contribute using fiat currency, debit card, credit card, or you can donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. And if you become a member, you get early access to video content, priority during the Q&A. You get a cool little badge on your profile in the forum, and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will be back next week.
Thanks, everyone.